Can we actually ask how many of you are single? Can you raise your hand? Okay, and how many of you are in relationships? Okay, and how many are married? Okay, just wanted to know.
Okay, so whether, and I'm going to read the only for the purposes of the recording too. So whether you're single and feeling a deep desire to start a family or a relationship and you want to feel a little bit solid before welcoming children, this is the session for you. Essentially, my story, just to kind of dive in, is that I was turning 40 and I essentially was kind of on the bitter bus. I was like, oh my God, everyone's getting married, everyone's having kids. What's going on with me? And I just kind of felt like I was feeling left behind, quite frankly. And I kind of had like that one moment where you have like your conversation with self. And I was like, okay, you either need to get in the game or just shut up about it, quite frankly. And so I essentially, like a month after my 40th birthday, I went online and I signed up on Match.com, and I essentially spent a month just shopping. I kind of just like, oh, it's like shoe shopping. I was like, put them in my cart, but don't actually buy anything. Yeah, I was shopping for men, essentially. And I just, ironically or not, I came by my husband's profile and I essentially like clicked and just said one little line. I didn't even like put that much effort into it. But long story short is like we ended up dating and obviously got married. But it was like a bumpy road. I mean, it wasn't easy because I was 40, and I feel like when you're a little bit older and finding love, I don't know, maybe, you'll probably have something to say about this.
Yeah.
Is you're a little more settled, right, in your life. And I feel like maybe had I met him when I was 35, it would have been this seamless like relationship situation. But quite frankly, I had to like adjust my life a lot. He would, want to like see me quite often. And I just was like, whoa, wait a second. I kind of have this like single lady life going on and I'm in charge and I'm the boss of it. And so it was really a lot of compromising that I didn't really think about when, I was searching for that love. And I kept telling the universe, I'm so ready for love. Bring love to my life. Because, my therapist and friends kept saying, well, are you really opening yourself up to love? And I think that a lot of women think, I just want Mr. Right to show up. Well, I had Mr. Right, Mr. Perfect. He was hot. He was amazing. He was like a communicator. He said to me in the first 2 weeks, so are you dating other people or are you, looking for a relationship? Because I'm looking for a serious relationship. And I was like, whoa. And it kind of freaked me out because I think that even though I said I was ready for love, I think in a way there was still like a part of me that was like, I'm ready for love, but on my terms. And I think that was a really big factor for me. So that's just kind of a little bit of my story in terms of, like how I found Chris, my husband.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So my thing is like, tell me a little bit about your story and your background.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. It's one of the things that I really want to talk about today is like we think we're ready and we don't really actually know what that means, right? We think we're open, but we don't really know what that actually looks like. So my story starts with, me and my husband. I can kind of sum it up in one sentence. We went from breakup to makeup to marriage. We were close to divorce in the first 2 years of our relationship, and now we're in an outrageously happy relationship, as I call it. But it started with me chasing after him. And this is so atypical, right? Most dating coaches will say to you, oh, stay away from talking about your career and politics and religion and, look unavailable and, don't text right away and, don't look needy and, that whole spiel. And I totally think all of that is crap, by the way. But I did all of that wrong, completely wrong. I did all of those things. I reached out to him. I asked him out to dinner, and he said no. And then I said, okay, well then would you like to have dessert? And he was like, no. And so, this went on for about several months actually. The reason I was doing that was because there was a lot of, for me, I wanted to give it my all and see what would happen at the end of that. And there was a cutoff for me. I was literally like, okay, if I hit this place where I'm like, I'm inviting him one more time. And I decided this one day where I was like, okay, I'm going to invite him out with my friends one more time. And if he says no or doesn't show up, I'm done because I deserve better. Right. And so I did that. He didn't show up and I was done. Then when I was done, he came running.
Of course.
Yeah, he came running. And so he came running, and that started off a 4-year relationship. And one Christmas, we were going back to Cincinnati. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, where my parents live. And I was like, it's Christmas, it's the holiday season, he's going to propose. I told like my closest friends, he's going to propose, he has the ring, I picked out my dress, all of this, right? And so I was super excited. 2 days before leaving, he calls me, and I was like, so are you excited about going to Cincinnati? And he's kind of got really quiet. And
I hate that quiet, the silence.
Yeah, it was deafening in that moment. And he got quiet, and I said, what's up? Like, I could tell something was off. And he immediately launched into, I'm not coming to Cincinnati. I've been unhappy for several months now, and I think we should go on a break, right? And in that moment, I was devastated, for sure. And like a million questions were coming to my head, like why, when, what are you talking about? I felt like I was just blindsided. Yeah. And then I went home and crying every day. And I decided, wait, I'm gonna win him back. Like, I'm gonna win him back. We love each other. I came back to New York, and I sent him like this huge care package. I put everything that I loved in it, like books and food and all this stuff, and sent it. And I waited by the phone, and I said, okay, he'll call me because he's gonna realize that I'm the one that loves him, and I'm the only one that knows him, and no phone call, right? But I turned into that girl that we don't ever want to turn into, and which we've all been in at one point in time when you really fall in love with somebody. And so a year and a half later, he came back into my life, and we got married. And about 2 years in, if you had asked me, was I happy? I would have actually probably said to you, I was. Meanwhile, inside, I was walking to the subway because I lived in New York and thinking, like, what is marriage all about? Like, what was the point of it? And one summer day, I think we got into a tiff around the garbage or the kitchen or something.
Really major.
Yeah, something small. And we sat down on the couch, and he said, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And in that moment, I immediately went into groveling because I could feel I felt exactly the way it felt when he first broke up with me.
The finality.
Mm-hmm. And I said, I went into groveling, and then after I had given myself some space, I just asked myself, how am I here again, right? I thought I had figured it all out. I overanalyzed it. Mm-hmm. I said I knew what happened in our relationship that went bad. I knew that I didn't want to be with somebody that was like this and this, and I knew that I was going to fix this and this about myself. So how am I here again? And really, that's when I sought out the help that I needed and got support, because what I was doing unknowingly, I didn't know I was doing this. I thought I was being loving and open and caring. And meanwhile, I wasn't really letting him love me. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't letting that in. And I didn't realize that. And it would have happened with any man. It wasn't just about him. Because there were certain blocks that I had within myself that were just not going to let any man in. Right.
It's interesting that you say that, because Chris was my first date on Match.com. I know, random. And I think I had a similar experience where, again, you're asking for that someone to show up. And I think, I realized that I kind of had, I guess it was like intimacy issues, because I was fine, we're hanging out. But as soon as it became real, I kind of freaked out a little bit. And I actually broke up with him 6 months into the relationship, and he was devastated. He was like, we're not done yet. What are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, I was kind of in this weird way grossed out by him. I know that sounds really when I tell the story, he's like, babe,
Can you guys relate?
He's like, babe, do you have to tell it so harshly? I go, well, that's really how I felt. If you never called me again, I would be totally fine.
Yeah.
And you know, I think like all my friends, literally, I think in a way, like a lot of times, you know, I think our friends are really good radars, but we don't like want to listen to the ones who love us the most. And they were like, what are you looking for? If it's not him, I mean, look at him. Have you seen that hot guy in front of you? He's a communicator. He tells you how he feels. He like surprises you with like a typewriter, and you're a writer, and it's a vintage typewriter that you guys saw on your first date. I mean, like, who are you looking for? And I was like, and it kind of was just, it was like, whoa, like really having to check my stuff. And I think the answer was like, I didn't know what I was, like, if it wasn't him, who was I looking for?
Yeah.
And I think you really do. I think you know, the stuff that I've read and like the advice that you give is so sound, because I think that it's really like kind of coming to that quiet place of, you know, really sitting with yourself and kind of having that like, okay, self, you know, what are you really ready for and what you're not ready for, and being honest with yourself. And I think there's one thing, like, what's something that we can specifically do, like when we're interacting with a potential, you know, date, for example, like my first date with Chris. I mean, I have to say, he's really chatty. I'm pretty chatty. We had like a 3-hour date. And I remember like in the first, you know, 2 hours, we had a 3-hour date. He said, you know, so do you want to have kids? And I was like, oh my God, no guy's ever asked me that. But like, you know, how do you make yourself comfortable for that first date to even begin with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big question, but you know, I think that the first thing is they're just deeper patterns, right? So the thing that I hear from women all the time that are specifically single is, you know, there are no good men left out there. You know, there really just are no good men left out there. And you know, if I do go out to a bar and I'm interested in a guy, he usually has a girlfriend, or you know, it's where I live. That sucks. All the men here are like, you know, this kind of person, and I'll tell you, none of that is true. And I know that you want to believe that's so true because you have so much evidence to prove that that is, but it's not. And so we have filled our mind, and it's really coming from our subconscious, with all of these thoughts of men and what they stand for, a partner of some sort that you're looking for, right? And so the first question I really ask of, you know, every single one of my clients is, what is the dialogue that you're having with yourself in your head around men or a potential partner? Is it that they don't exist? Is it that they just want one thing? They just want sex? Is it that they're not trustworthy? Is it that, you know, I want to stay Miss Independent and make sure that, you know, I've gotten myself squared away because then nobody can touch me, you know? So you really have to ask yourself that first question. What is the dialogue in your subconscious? Because that's what's coming through and having you see all these unavailable men. Or have you gone on dates with men that just want one thing? Or have you gone on dates with men that are not trustworthy, right? That's what's happening. It's coming through your subconscious. And I'm not saying you guys are at fault, because the subconscious has been developed from a very young age. It's not something that you just decided, I'm going to not trust men today. It's not something that you just decided. It's something that's come from a long, long time ago. So to answer your question, I know I'm going at it in a roundabout way, but the first place is to ask yourself, what are those thoughts? And if you're in a relationship, it's the same question. What dialogue are you having around what a man stands for or what your husband stands for in your mind or your partner? And starting to see, what is that like? And then the second step is, where's that coming from? So I'm going to give a really quick story. So, you know, one of my clients, when we first met, she's like, she's a friend of mine as well. So we were out to dinner, and she's like, I have a question for you. I was like, okay. She's like, just one. She's like, I have this guy that I'm dating, and the chemistry is awesome. The physical stuff is so great. We're so connected. It's amazing. But the emotional stuff isn't quite there. And I said, okay. I was like, why do you think the emotional stuff isn't quite there? And, you know, we see this a lot, right? Especially if you're single, you feel like, you know, the emotional is there, but the physical is not, or the physical is there and the emotional is not. And so I said, why do you think that is? And she's like, well, we're totally two opposite people. We're totally different. You know, I love the city. I love dressing up and going out to nice fancy dinners and going out on the town. And he loves being a country bumpkin and, hiking and biking and being really active. And I said, okay. She's like, so, we have totally different interests and totally different people, so it's never going to work. And red flags are going off in my head because there are lots of people that are opposites that have really healthy relationships because you get to introduce each other to something different and new. So the first question I asked her, and will ask it all of you as well, is, what is your perception of your parents' relationship? And she said, okay. She's like, well, how does this have to do with my love life? I'm like, just bear with me. Just keep going with what I'm saying. She's like, okay, well, my parents are still together, but I would never want their relationship. Like, I just would never want it. And I said, okay. She said, because they just kind of coexist in the house. They talk to one another and they interact. They kind of just...
They're boring.
Yeah, they're boring. They have a boring kind of relationship and they have nothing in common. They have nothing in common. So they have nothing to talk about. They don't share any interests that are the same. So if you're connecting the dots the way I did, she saw her parents, and in her subconscious, essentially what was happening was that was her representation of what a relationship looks like. Right. Whether you like it or you don't like it, that's your representation. And so she was using that and saying, I would never want that. And then trying to ensure in her dating life that she has that interest thing in common, because that would mean that it's going to be healthy and it's going to last and it's going to be beautiful. And that's not actually true. Right? That's not actually true. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what I told her to do is, and I'm still answering your question, but what I told her to do was you need to go and ask your parents. And if your parents aren't alive or you just, one is, that's fine. You can just do this dialogue with a sibling, or you could do it with the parent that is here, or with grandparents, whatever, works. And so I said, you need to find out their love story. So what is it that they love about one another? Because they still love one another on some level. So what is that? And find that out, because your picture of their relationship is like one chapter of an entire book. Right. And so we need to expand it. So she did. She found out their love story, and she thought she knew all of it, But I said, just do the exercise, and she did. And she found out all this new stuff that she had not known before around them courting each other when they got together, why they're still together now, what's amazing about their relationship. And literally it shifted her perspective. And she started to date this guy that she was like, I think I'm done. I don't think he's the right one. She dated him, and they are now in a relationship, right? But she was so ready to write him off, and this was her tendency. Right. So it's really a lot deeper, right? We want to say, like, I could say to you, you just need to be confident and put on that hot dress and put on those hot heels, and you'll feel it when you're in that moment. And you will when you do that. And I think that's totally good to do for the first date, is to feel really hot in your body.
Or comfortable.
Or comfortable. But to, own it. But, if the reasons why we can't is something much deeper. And that's really what I wanted women to really understand, because it's so easy to beat ourselves up over, well, I wore the awesome dress and the hot shoes, and I'm still turning into somebody that I don't want to be on this first date. Right.
Yeah, and I also think just like being authentic to yourself, and also just kind of trusting because I have friends who are like, oh, I went on 3 dates with him and I don't know, and then I'm, and then they're going on the 5th date, and I'm like, well, why do you keep going on dates with them? Like, you have to trust your inner compass at some point to know that, like, either you're not showing up, wholly authentically who you are, or you're fronting to be like, aren't I hot and sexy in this dress? Like me, I could never wear a heels and a dress to like a first date, because I'd be like, oh my God, my feet are killing me. My bra is not the right bra. Like, I just completely, like, literally, I laugh at Chris because I go, babe, do you remember what I was wearing at our first date? He goes, yeah, of course, black. Because I always wear black. But it's a joke, is that I really do have to feel like just me. I mean, a lot of friends I have can wear heels, like walking all the way through this whole campus, and I could not even barely get across the street, because I just know I'm an island girl at heart. I like to wear just like open-toed shoes, and I have to be comfortable. Then I can like conquer the world. Mm-hmm. But like if I'm not comfortable and like being authentic to who I am, and the conversation's not authentic, and I'm trying to front and whatnot, mm-hmm. I think that's another big thing, is like as you get kind of older and more comfortable with who you are, I think you recognize like the guys out there who are also feeling the same way. Like the fact that my husband could say to me, like within the first like 2 to 3 weeks of like just, dating, are you looking for a serious relationship, or are you just kind of looking to date around? Because I'm not. He said to me, he's like, I don't have a lot of free time, and I, just want to kind of put that out on the table. And I think honestly, it was probably one of the first times that like a man had been that forthcoming and that honest, because what it showed me was, okay, this guy's for real. He's not like, hey, let's just, go back to your place, which, hey, there's a time and a place for all kinds of relationships. But I think I was really taken aback by that. And and when I tell the story to my girlfriends, I say, isn't that sad that I was like so taken aback by this guy being so completely 100% authentic? And that it's one of those things that I just tell or try to share with my friends, like, that's what I deserved. I deserved a guy who was willing to put himself out there, which kind of like curves into our conversation of, okay, in dating, which, if we're women of our 30s and we're dating, and there's guys out there who like, it's kind of the joke with my male friends, like, oh, I don't want to date her if she's over 30, because then she's looking for a husband and a sperm donor. And then there's the like, you want to be authentic and be honest that you do want to have kids. And I mean, when Chris asked me on our first date, so, do you want to have kids? I honestly didn't know how I was going to lie. I was going to be like, yeah, either like, yes or no, neither here nor there or whatever. I was going to say that because I kind of felt like that's the right answer. But, I said to him, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely want kids. I was like, what about you? He goes, well, I was starting. He goes, yes, I do want kids. And it was interesting that he said, I actually kind of have come to a place of acceptance that I may, because he was 39. He's like, I may actually, be a stepdad to somebody, because the women that I would be dating, I'm not going to date younger women. He's like, I don't have any interest in that. But, that the women I might date may already have kids, maybe even have more than one kid. And I just, again, that was another sign of like somebody who was like, okay, wow, he's really thought this out, And I think that one of the things that a lot of my friends, would probably want to ask you is, when we are dating and it gets to a point where children come up, whether it's, do you want to have children? Neither of us have children, or there are children in the picture. Like, how do you bring that conversation of when is the right time, and how do you approach somebody about, children without being afraid to scare them off or, offend or whatnot?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And so I think the first thing is asking yourself, like, do you know for sure what it is that you want, right? Because why were you hesitating in that moment? Was it because you wanted to see if he wanted children or not? So, and then you were going to adjust otherwise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't, but I thought my thinking was, if I say yes, he's going to be like, oh shit, she's one of those who like definitely is looking for a baby daddy, or, I did. It was kind of just that fleeting moment of nobody's like no guy. I mean, have you guys had a guy ask you that recently if you're single? Like, hey, do you want to have kids?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think it was just kind of that, like, I've never been asked that by a guy. By my girlfriends, sure.
Yeah.
But by a almost 40-year-old man, no.
Yeah. So I think, so in this forum, just like, that you want to have kids, right? And the way that it's approached is it's the energy in which you're talking about it, honestly. Like, you could bring it up on the first date, but if it's heavy for you, if it's like there's a lot of pressure around it, which there is for a lot of us.
So are you down doing IVF?
Right, but right, exactly. But even if you don't say the words, we think, oh, well, I didn't say those words. I didn't say IVF, or I didn't say any of that. I just said, do you want to have children? But if you have the energy behind that of, like, my biological clock is ticking and I am running out of time and I've got to find this person, and all of that energy is associated with this just simply saying, do you want to have kids? Then they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it. It's going to feel heavy. It's going to feel hot, right? And then it does go south typically, because if the guy's ready, then he'll probably say, I am ready, and he does want to have kids. But if there's all that energy, he can feel that. And that's what pushes him away. It's not the fact that you ask the question, because the question can just be really simple. And do you want to have kids? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Right? It doesn't have to be heavy. But if we're coming to the table with a lot of the pressure that comes around it for us, then that's when it becomes dicey, because that's when it feels like, whoa, there's a lot going on for her around this question.
Well, then on that, and that's really helpful. And then even beyond that, what about if you're a single woman who has a child and is now going out to the dating world? Because there's a lot of women who are like modern women, and I'm going to do this myself. And, you know, I have girlfriends who are in that position, but then they also, it's all about their kid, and they're not also, I mean, I'm sure we have an audience, you know, who are also holding themselves back from bringing love back into their life and, you know, also being happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same answer, honestly. Like, I think it's beautiful to share that on a first date. I don't think there's no reason for anybody to hold much back, honestly. The faster you get to really being yourself and who you are, the faster you realize if that person is right or wrong for you. Because they're either going to be like, wow, that's amazing, I appreciate that about you, or they're going to be like, whoa, that's not. And good riddance. Filter faster, right?
Oh, I
Filter
love that.
faster. And I see women way too much holding so much back because they don't want him to scare him away or have him run the other way. And they hold all of these things back, and then weeks or months later, they start to become more of who they are. And now the guy's running at that point because now you're showing more of it. And he's like, wait, I didn't see this yet, right? So that's why I even told my story in the beginning of me just being uninhibited and talking about things that were so uncouth to some degree, right? Because, yeah, that may have in the moment, like, pushed him away a little bit, but he also got to know me.
Yeah.
And so when I was like, I'm done, he was like, whoa, I'm missing out on a pretty amazing woman, right? So it's the same answer.
Yes.
It's really, if you come at it with energy, and that's the work that I'm talking about, the energy and the pressures that we have in these words and in saying this stuff is really deep, right? And we've got to clear that up. And that's why I was talking about the parent stuff, right? Because it's all kind of associated with our childhood and the parent stuff. And when we can get lighter with it and feel good with it, that's when you could go on that first date and say, hey, do you want to have kids? And it be light and easy, and you get to the truth pretty quickly, right? So just like, I didn't even say this in the first one, but the tip that I wanted to give around the parent stuff is, you know, asking yourself the question of, what is my perception of my parents' relationship? If you do think that they have an amazing relationship, choose one side or the other. So choose, like, you have to choose one. So you have to choose, like, yes, I would like to have it, even though there's caveats, you know, it's not perfect, but I would like to have it. Or you might be on the side of, like, I would never want it. Now, if you're on the side of never wanting it, find out their love story. Even if you think you know it, find out, because there's way more to it than you think. And if you're on the other side where you're like, I really admire their relationship and I would like to have it, then find out what were some of the problems that they really had in the beginning. What were some of the problems that they had when they were having children? What were the problems that they probably kept from you because they didn't want you to be burdened by them? Because there were always problems. No relationship is without them. And they just probably didn't want to burden you with them. So what that does is it gives you a bigger perspective of what love actually contains. And then you come to the table with a flexibility of what love really can be like, which is a whole breadth of stuff, versus like, this is how it has to be, and it has to be perfect.
So on the other side of that coin, if your parents had a relationship that you don't admire or obviously had issues or they split up, then how do you approach that other side of the coin? Do you say,
well, that's what I'm saying.
What's the happy part? What were the happiest?
What's the love story?
What
was your love story? What's your love story?
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's literally what changed my entire marriage. I felt like my parents should have gotten a divorce, and they had fought my entire life. I'd been coaching him since I was 13 years old. When most kids would run the other way when they were fighting, I'd be like, hey, Dad, this is what Mom means. And Mom, that's what Dad means. And, you know, I had that philosophy. I was like, the only reason they're together is because of culture and religion, because I'm Indian. And that was the way I'd kind of dialogued it my whole life and in my subconscious. So what was happening in my marriage is that I wanted Hemel, who's my husband, to change in a specific way. I wanted him to be more religious with me, even though I knew when I married him, we weren't of the same religion. I knew all that, but when I got married, it changed. And I was like, no, I want this. And I was trying to make him change, trying to nag him to change. And that's what was breaking us apart, pulling us apart. But the reason I was doing it was not because I'm a nag, or not because like I'm an overbearing woman, or I'm a fixer, or whatever we try to label ourselves. I was doing it because I didn't even know this at the time, but in my subconscious, if he wasn't cultured or religious, then it was going to end. Because my parents were still together because of those two things, right? So when I found out their love story, which I thought I knew everything about my parents, by the way, and I found it out and they told me so much about it, and I sought out the love that they have together, and they're no different. They still fight. There's nothing different about the relationship. I just see it completely differently. And in every fiber of my being, I know they love one another. And when I realized that, it changed everything in my marriage, and that's why we are where we're at now. I mean, there's more to it, but that's one of the slivers.
Yeah. I love that story. I think that's really important. And I think if I look at like my own relationship with my husband, we finally, I finally got as my aunt says, get your head out of your butt. Mm-hmm. She told me, she's like, you have this wonderful guy. And I think I did. It's like, I had to come full circle. I had to kind of like explore a couple of things. And, we, through our journey, it's like, I had 3 miscarriages, I had fibroid surgery. We ended up doing IUI, and, all of that stuff puts a lot of pressure. And so I think that like doing all the things that you're suggesting and all your tips are really a really wonderful way to lay down a foundation, because truthfully, you don't know what your journey is ahead ever. Mm-hmm. You take kids off the table. Just marriage in itself has so many, ups and downs and ebbs and flows and so forth. And, you're not going to be the same 2 people that you started, as being, and, both people change, and it's kind of like being able to communicate and be open and know who you are through that change is really, it's kind of like that Robert Frost of the only way out is through. Mm-hmm. And it's really in all areas of your life. And I think it's, something that I have to remind myself in the midst of like juggling a 2-year-old, and like, how do I keep passion alive when I'm like, don't even want to like look at you or talk to you. And, sometimes it's, hey, we haven't had a conversation in like 3 days. It's like, and what? You know what I mean? Like, so you have to have a sense of humor. And, I think that a lot of it is, knowing yourself and foundation, and exploring kind of the heritage of your family in terms of the relationship and love. It's such a really great advice.
Yeah, because I mean, your first experiences around love are your parents, and they're your role models, mm-hmm. and how you related to mom, how you related to dad. You may have been, 6 years old and said, Mom, I'm so excited to show you I got an A on my paper. And she just ignored you and said, that's great, and that translated into your subconscious. And so there's all these little ways that we interacted with love at a very young age, and it's stored away. And so I just really want women to understand that whether you're in a relationship or single, and the whole fertility thing and the baby thing, and I know it's a huge, huge conversation, and it's really about creating space for ourselves, right? And the pressure that we're putting on ourselves in every way, mm-hmm. right? Not just with children or having or conceiving, but in so many other aspects of our life. How do we start to be easier with who we are, right? Easier with all of that. And that comes with really kind of going into our past and understanding why we're choosing to be so like pressured mm-hmm. on certain things for ourselves now. Right. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, does anyone have any questions or ideas, comments? Doesn't have to be a question.
Yeah.
So I'm getting back into dating.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, so I'm kind of the woman that Stacie described, one of these modern women who decided to have a child of my own, more or less. What are sort of tips or recommendations that you might have for how to approach this? Because I think it is much different than if you're sort of footloose and fancy free and just sort of like, it's not even necessarily the husband and then the wedding and the marriage that I'm looking at. It's more like a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And someone who would definitely also fit in with my top priority, which is my son. Like, just very, very briefly, I have some very dear friends who had 2 children, who got married, had 2 children together, had a horrendous acrimonious divorce.
Yeah.
both started up new relationships with people, and those both dissolved, and now they're actually reconciling and coming back together and living again in the same house because they just found that these new boyfriends, girlfriends they had could not accept that their first priority was the child. And they realized that the only other person who could accept that and understand that would be their former spouse. And that's actually what brought them back together.
Okay.
And there's something kind of cautionary there. I'm not sure what yet, but there is.
Well, I'll say to you, that wasn't just the only thing.
Yeah.
So people will tell you that's the only thing, and there is way more to it than that. So know that's not the only thing. Because I think what are you scared of?
I think that I'm scared of this idea that it would be almost impossible for a non-biological father to my son to understand that my son will always come first.
Okay.
And how do you find room for that in someone's life? How do you accept that? How do you come to understand that?
Okay. So it's interesting, right? Because when you want to be in a relationship, it's actually starting to open up to the idea that your son is first always, and you have room for another person to be first too, right? There doesn't have to be just one place. I know that we've been trained that that's the case, but we do this all the time. Like, we manage people that are a priority in our lives. It's not just one person that's our priority. We've got lots of priorities of people that we love in our lives, correct? Right? And so it's really shifting a bit of your mindset around that, because if you go into dating men with, he's my priority and you're going to always be second, that doesn't feel so good. Right. Even if he had a child and he came into, you both come to a relationship and he's like, well, that's my priority. And you're like, that's my priority. Where do you guys land? Right? So it's really about being open to the idea that people understand that your child is your priority. They just may not be ready for the fact that you have a child. And if they're not ready for that, that's not the right person for you. But they get it. They get it just as much as you get it. And so really shifting that feeling or that idea that they're not going to get it, or that your son is the priority and that's it, and really having space for there to be people in your life that are all priority. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help.
That's interesting that you say that, because my closest guy friend, who I've known since I was 16, we came back together, so to say, like probably 12 years ago. But, the first, as friends, we lost touch. But the first, 3, 4, 5, 6 years that we were all hanging out as just single, fancy free, 30-somethings, he always used this line. He's like, yeah, I just have to tell her that, look, hey, I don't want to date. I don't actually, I'm not going to date seriously because my son is my priority. He would say it, that was his, line. That was his get out of jail card that he would use. And I used to say to him, I go, everyone buys that? Seriously, what if a girl says, that's cool, that's your priority? You know what I mean? That was his MO for 10 years. And he finally, just about a year ago, started dating a woman seriously who he, only met online. And it was just so crazy because I for the first time I saw him be vulnerable and actually put himself in a place of not being the putting that out there, that energy out there, like you're saying. Yeah. And it's so interesting. I saw a shift in his being when he stopped using the card. And and then he, she essentially has kind of broken his heart since then. But it was such a good experience for him to get his heart broken, No, I mean in a raw way where he can't get out of bed and he's crying and that kind of stuff. And I was like, that's right. That's what you need to feel right there, And the thing is we all have these, things that we put up, these walls, these excuses, these reasons, and so forth. And I love your philosophy, which is really that's all cool and that, but that's not what it's about.
Yeah, it's true, and it's a way for us to kind of block love too, right? So, I mean, another, just really quickly, I want to get to other questions, but another quick intuitive question I have for you is, how were you raised, and was it you weren't that important, or was it something like that where you're now really wanting to give that to your child? in some way, you know, and I'd have to dig a little bit.
Oh, look at that.
Spot on. Yeah. And so going back and really understanding that you were always important to them and understanding that because you're now passing that on to your relationship with your child.
I love that. This is all such great information. Thank you so much, Kavita, for coming out from New York to be with us today. If you want to have ask any questions afterwards, please stay and ask some questions. Go to fertilityplanet.com. You can book any appointments to speak with any of our speakers. Thank you so much, Fora.tv, for recording all of our programs today. And you can watch videos and all of our sessions on the Fertility Planet website very soon. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. And please share your views and continue the conversation online, Twitter, Facebook, with the hashtag FPLA14, because we want to hear from you. Thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh my God, my girlfriend.
And also, if you guys have one of these and want to fill it out, it's a free gift for the single women. There's a call. There's a guide called Why He Hasn't Called that I can give to you. That'll send you through email. And if you're in a relationship, there's a three decisions audio call that I've taped about how to have the relationship of your dreams. So if you want to fill that out, that would be great. And you can give it to my assistant, Rachel, right there, and we'll send that to you.